Hi, welcome to Parenting Talk. I'm your host, Coach Donnie Hall, and I am a parenting and family dynamics coach as well as an ecologist. And I'm with Star Family Coaching. And today is my first ever Parenting Talk, and I'm very pleased and happy to have with us today my wife, but also an expert in adoption. And she wears many hats. She is the chair of the local Chamber of Commerce where we live. She is also the editor and producer and director, and she wears all the hats for her monthly newsletter that comes out at the top of every month. And she's also the owner and broker of her family real estate company called Padovan Realty. So it's my honor and pleasure to welcome my beautiful wife, who also knows a lot about adoption, and that's the topic for today. And so I want to welcome her. And, what do you think, sweetie? What do you think about this whole process? And welcome to Parenting Talk.
Thank you, Coach Hall, my husband. I'm very happy to be here because talking about adoption is one of my favorite things to do.
All right, let's get started. What questions did you have about adoption that you wish you had the answers to before you began the process?
Well, one of the things that I didn't expect was the amount of paperwork. The quantity of paperwork is daunting, and you don't really get to enjoy the process of the adoption when you're doing all this paperwork. So in our case, we adopted from Russia. My kids are from two very different parts of Russia. And basically, the paperwork for both was I call it a phone book size. Remember the old-fashioned phone books way back in the day? Every day there would be a new questionnaire to fill, psychological evaluations, everything. And while that's wonderful because you want the adoptive parents to be vetted profoundly and completely, you also want to enjoy the process. In my case, it was 9 months, just like a pregnancy for each child. So the first one, I didn't really get to enjoy the process of preparing the room, preparing myself, meditating, doing what all expectant mothers get to do. With my daughter, Carolina, the second adoption, then I realized the paperwork is one thing. Do the paperwork, it'll get done, it'll all be done, but enjoy every minute of the process of setting up the room, of preparing yourself, of getting the books and reading everything you possibly can get your hands on. That is being prepared as an adoptive parent is everything. And during that period, in addition to the paperwork, to start doing the homework to bring this little human being into your lives.
So it sounds like to me that there were some things that you couldn't have anticipated before without actually having to gone through the process, some of which led to some anxiety. Sounds like the paperwork could have even gotten overwhelming at times. So you have to look at adoption as kind of like a pregnancy into itself.
Yes.
Does that sound about right?
Absolutely.
And just like you go through the pregnancy, you want to take some time to actually enjoy the process. So it's kind of like smell the roses while you're on the trip.
Yeah, and read and learn and know what's coming, and just like you prepare for a baby and you read all those pregnancy books, the same exact process, only you're reading more towards how you're going to deal with the adoptive factor of having a child, because it is different, and you don't want to ignore or minimize that it's going to be a different experience having an adoptive child than a biological child, certainly in the early stage where you're preparing.
So somebody looking to think about adoption, or their heart set on it, and they're just getting started, is there an age that's best for adoption, both for the parent and, of course, for the child?
Well, you can adopt a baby before they're born. So in the States, you can contact a mother that's giving up their child for adoption, and through a process with an attorney and being chosen, also the mother is included in the process generally, you can go through the entire pregnancy with the biological mother. And then you can be there for the delivery and take the baby at birth. we also have a system here. We don't have orphanages in the US. We have a foster care system. So you can, these kids are, when they're given up, they're put into homes that are vetted. I mean, the parents, the foster parents do go through quite a bit of paperwork, but usually it's a home with numerous children. There does happen to be abuse in many of the homes. I mean, not in all of them, but there is many cases of abuse. It's not an ideal situation by any means. So you can also adopt an older child from the foster care system. In my case, and this is why you have to know yourself, you have to know your situation, you have to know who you are, you have to know what you can handle. In my case, we could have biological children. I went through a miscarriage, and through that miscarriage, I was illuminated that I did not want to go through a biological experience having a child. I realized there were so many kids that needed parents and needed a family, and I knew that that was the route we would take. So for me, it was a first case. That was my first choice. But usually parents that adopt tend to be a little bit older because they use it kind of as the last resort after they've tried everything and exhausted the possibilities to become a biological parent. So I was in my early 30s, and I realized I wanted a very young child. However, I didn't want a birth mother involved. I don't know if it was a selfish thing, but I didn't want to participate in the pregnancy and have a birth mother in my life. I knew that I couldn't handle that. That for me, I wanted to be mom, 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 and that's it, and not have another party involved. So I took the route of the youngest child possible in an orphanage. Now, my heroes are the ones that take older babies. Why? Because there's something called attachment disorder. When a baby doesn't bond with a primary caregiver at a very early age, a child tends to have attachment disorder. And generally that happens after 2 years old. So you have to, that's why it's so important to know yourself, know your capacity, know what you can handle, know what you can financially handle if you have a child with issues, because everything is you can overcome anything, right? In my opinion, you can overcome anything. So if a parent knows how to take care and treat a child with difficulties, they can overcome those difficulties and have a perfectly wonderful, normal life. So it's a matter of what you're able to provide for that child. So in my opinion, the older a child, the more you're really helping society. But you can adopt a child at any age. And in the Russian orphanages, at 18, the children are given a stipend of $100 about a month and said, good luck, have a good life. So I know of parents that have gone to Russia and have adopted kids that are very close to 18 to give them the possibility of college, a future, and that's basically saved the person, the child, from having to go out on the streets and fend for themselves. So from before birth to 18, you can adopt a child, and any time is a good time.
Yeah, and according to the way the politics are today, Russia has closed the gates on adoption.
Correct.
For the time being. But,
yes.
These are true for many other countries. I know that there's orphanages and adoptions that take place, say, in Guatemala, for example, and many other countries around the world have these types of systems that are very similar to Russia.
Correct.
Okay, so it sounds like you got a lot of options. So the big issue really is not so much with the children in terms of their age, but more about the maturity level of the parent and what they can handle and what their capacity and what they're able to give.
Absolutely. I think you have to know yourself before you can take care of anybody, and you have to know what you're able to handle.
Okay, let's move on to another question that a lot of people are going to have out there. Certainly was one of our questions. Should you tell your child that they've been adopted? And if so, when do you do this?
Okay, well, this is my pet peeve question. This question drives me insane. I still have people in 2018, almost 2019, that ask me once in a while, do your kids know they're adopted? And I look at them and I think, wait a minute, so you know my kids are adopted, but they don't know, so we're sharing a secret that my children don't know. It's insane. I absolutely don't understand the question in any way. So any book you read, any psychological, any book about parenting will tell you you must tell them they're adopted. There is no option. This is not a maybe, it's not a question. It's absolutely you must tell them they're adopted. Otherwise, they'll grow up and they will find out, because everything comes out. So they will know one day, and they will believe that everything they've ever known is a lie, and that everything you've ever told them is a lie. And it will damage them so profoundly to know that you've been lying to them their entire lives. I personally didn't even like to tell them about Santa Claus when they were growing up. I despised that it was a lie and that it was a made-up thing. And I understood society-wise why it was important to maintain that, etc. But it hurt me to lie to them about Santa Claus. I don't think we should lie to our children. I think we should be honest. And so, absolutely, you must tell your children they're adopted. Now, the question, the real question is how? How do you tell your child they're adopted? So, I did a lot of soul searching. This was a very complicated one because books do give different answers. There's no one way to tell a child they're adopted, right? So I decided my way was to not tell them they were adopted. What does that mean? Coach Hall, do you remember when someone told you you were a boy?
No, but I'm sure at some point they said boys on this side and girls on that side of the room, or something like this, and I got on the boys' side.
Okay, so the point is that what I wanted is my children to enter into consciousness whenever they kind of go, oh, I'm here and I really exist and I'm this, I'm that, and just know they knew that they were adopted. I would read them books. There's great books for kids. There's so many wonderful books for very young children talking about adoption. So it was always that there was a biological mother that loved you very much and gave you for adoption. In our case, put you in an orphanage because they wanted a better life. So they just knew that they were adopted, just like they knew my daughter's left-handed and my son's a brown-eyed boy and my daughter's blue-eyed. And they just knew it wasn't an issue. They'll never tell you when I sat them down and said, honey, I have something to tell you with balloons and whatnot. This was just, they knew that they were adopted from a very early age. And what I always told them was, when you're ready to ask questions, ask me anything and I will be 100% honest. Now, I also applied this to sex. Whenever they had questions about sex, they could ask me and I would be 100% honest. One day my daughter asked me a question that I can't repeat here in this context, and I answered her very honestly, and she looked at me horrified and said, never mind. So they sometimes don't know that they're ready to hear the answer to the questions they're asking, but when they ask the questions, they'll be ready. They'll be ready to ask. And then I think that you have to be honest. So that's what we've done always. The other thing very important, in my opinion, is that you tell them that the birth mother, whatever the situation is, for whatever reason, they were put either in an orphanage, foster care, whatever it was, that it was done in love. That it was done to give them a better opportunity, a future, that everything was done in love. And for me, it's very easy with Russia because, you might say, but wait a minute, you put me in an orphanage. How could my biological mother love me if she put me in an orphanage? And I can answer that very clearly, that half of the children in Russian orphanages couldn't be adopted because they were missing one piece of paper or two pieces of paper. It was tragic. These little babies unable to be adopted because of paperwork. So the fact that for my two children, their biological mothers put them in the orphanage with everything signed, sealed, delivered, ready to go, shows love. That's the reality. They were given that opportunity to have a better life. So for whatever reason, they had to give them up. They gave them up with a tremendous amount of love and caring and hope for their future.
Now, when it comes to this question, this probably is one of the biggest questions, this, adoption question that may be in our children's head. Do they ever use this against you in any sort of way? Like, you're not my mom?
Well, in the movies you see, you're not my real mom. You're not my real dad. Well, I've always had that in the back of my mind. That really bothered me, that whole concept of one day these little cute little children one day looking at me and being these monsters saying something like that. So one day my daughter asked me years ago, she said, I wonder if my mom had blue eyes like me. And I knew that was a moment, a tough moment where I had to put on my girl pants, my ovaries, as I say. And I looked at her and I said, sweetie, your mom has hazel eyes. Your mom, the one that every day takes care of you, that loves you, that has taken care of you from 9 months old, the one that's always there for you, the one that loves you unconditionally and always will, hazel eyes. However, your biological mom, she might very well have had blue eyes. My daughter's from Vladivostok, and that's the traditional blonde, blue-eyed, gorgeous women that you see in the movies. So that was an important moment for her to understand that mom is me. And that's it. There's nothing else to add to that. So I kind of nicked it, I hope, at that point. So now I have an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old, and so far, we have not gone there with the "you're not my real mom" thing, because I think they understand that I am definitely and 100% their real mom.
Okay, so it sounds like it's all smooth sailing from there, right?
Uh,
There's probably a few other struggles that go along with it. Is there any other struggles that you could think of that you would, like to share with those that are considering adoption?
Well, the first thing, of course, is a very daily normal thing, is that you go to the doctor, you have a baby, you go to a pediatrician, and they ask you history, and the nurse is asking you very nonchalantly all these questions about your pregnancy and all these questions about, the how, if this runs in the family or that runs in the family, and you have to say, I'm so sorry, my kids are adopted. I don't know. And they understand. And I think more and more as time goes on, I mean, as we become more and more enlightened sort of in society, I think it's less and less that they give you that side of that, oh, okay, like kind of shock. So that was one issue. The other issue, and this happens in every, really most of the adoptive cases I've heard, is that they're a little developmentally delayed. And I don't mean in an intellectual way. I just mean literally they are at a different age than their biological age. So they're, what is it called?
The chronological age.
The chronological age. So they're a
early bloomer, late bloomer.
Late bloomers, exactly. So
in sync, yeah. So these, they tend to be late bloomers.
They definitely tend to be late bloomers. So in my case, both of them repeated 7th grade. It was the best thing we did. And they've always had a bit of a struggle with school. We've always had tutors. We've always had, especially math. Math for my son it won't enter his brain, but I'm sure it doesn't enter many people's brains. But he's an artist, and they're both very smart. It's not a matter of intellectual intelligence. It's a matter of school being challenging. And in my daughter's case, she's 16, but she's much more comfortable with 14-year-olds. She just is a late bloomer, which is wonderful, because most 16-year-old girls are out there with the makeup and the short skirts, and she's out there getting on the varsity volleyball team and not even thinking about makeup. So everyone is who they are, and everyone's an individual. So, but do be prepared for possible school issues that they do struggle in school a bit.
Yeah, very good. I want to go back a little bit to the first part of the answer, dealing with the medical side of it. Is there anything that we can do today to help give us some answers to some of the medical history that our adopted children may have that we didn't used to have, say, 10 years ago?
Yes, and very recently. I mean, literally, I think we received my son's results 2 weeks ago. We did 23andMe for both of them. There's a few different DNA companies out there, and it just showed, where the DNA, where they were from, where their ancestry, the ancestry situation, and also some medical. My son didn't really have anything, but my daughter had something very interesting, which no biological mother or not could have figured out. She has to have her future husband checked for a certain chromosome, because if they both share it, they have a 25% chance of having a deaf child, which I think this technology is very, very, very new in being able to know something like this. So, I mean, I'm just a proponent for everybody to get one of these tests, because it's just valuable information. But that definitely helps. So you can tell, where your history is and whatnot. But the reality is, in our family, we're all mixed. I was born in South America, in Uruguay. My dad was born in Italy, in Bergamo. My stepdad was born in Argentina. So really, in our particular household, the only American, the only gringo is Coach Hall.
Really?
So my kids are Russian, I'm Uruguayan, Donnie's American. We're all good. Everything, you know.
Although the 23andMe test did reveal that I'm mostly from Europe. So.
Yes, as am I. Yes. So those are very useful for adoptive parents and for all of us.
Okay, super. We're getting close to the end of the time here. Are there any final thoughts about parenting an adopted child that you haven't mentioned so far that you'd like to just give us a few extra tips?
There are a couple of things I really want to mention. Be sure you get a wonderful agency. And not only here, if you're going international, make sure the agency abroad is fantastic. And the way to do this is to find research a good agency and then ask them for references of people that have gone through the entire process. And the question is, yes, is this agency great in here, but is the agency abroad excellent? Because that's really the key, because abroad is where you're going to be dealing with the judges, with the courts, if you do go international. So that's, the agency is everything. In my case, we didn't have any issues. Our agency was absolutely fantastic, but I've heard horror stories with the agencies. So that is vet the agencies. Second thing, also very important, never tell your child that they were chosen. This is in all the books, but this is really a key point, because your instinct is to tell your child, oh honey, we chose you. Out of all the kids in all the world, you're the one we chose. Now think about what that does to the child. Think about the pressure that puts on their shoulders to live up to that, to say, yeah, my mom chose me. Oh my gosh, I better be perfect. I've got to be perfect because I was chosen. What if I'm not perfect and they send me back? I mean, some crazy things that your kids, that kids think, you know, kids think all sorts of, like they think they're the reason that their parents get divorced. What's in the mind of a child is very different from a mature adult mind. So never tell your child that they were chosen. That is truly, I think, the best piece of advice. If you adopt a child that I can give you is just, and it's hard, you're going to want to do it, but don't do it. Don't put that pressure on them.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Is there, for those of you that are out there and you want more information, is there anything that you could do to help them get additional information? Or is there a way that they can contact you?
Yes, they can email me anytime. I love talking about this. I love helping people with adoption. It's really a joy and a pride and just something that I think so many more people should do. Every time I hear of someone going through in vitro fertilization and all these processes, I think, oh my goodness, you know, there's such a wonderful alternative that people kind of wait till as the last resort. And I think it really it should be the first resort. It's such a wonderful experience and it's such a pleasure. And when somebody asked me once, we were playing a game of, some psychological game, and someone asked me, what's the most important thing you've ever done? And I, without hesitation, I said, adopting my 2 children. So it really and truly is a wonderful thing. And I'd love to help you, talk to you, any questions that I can answer. I mean, I'm only the expert of my own life, so I can give you my experiences and my, anything I can do to help. But please contact me, email me, and we can chat on WhatsApp. We can do numerous ways of communication. And I'm happy to share anything I can with you.
Okay, well, super. Thank you so much, Paola Padovan, our adoption expert, for our very first parenting talk. We're going to continue this conversation with the comments below. Please, whatever you think about this, please mention it below here. We're going to keep it going. I'm also going to post this in several places, including my Facebook page under Star Family Coaching. There'll be some links so you can contact her. There'll be some links for recommended reading and things like this. So give us a thumbs up, tell us what you think, and give me some suggestions about future parenting talk as well. So that's it for today. And I'm just going to sign out by saying farewell, my friends.